Hello, good morning, afternoon, or evening, whatever time of day it is. It's me, Waifu Belector, and today I'm gonna talk about Dead Space. No, not that 15-year-old space game your older brother used to play. I'm talking about the shiny new 1-week-old remake of that space game. So let's talk about this new old thing. You know, what's good about it, what's bad about it, and what's just an indifferent fact. And as always, I'll try not to waste your time, so let's get into it. Now, for those who don't know, as I said, Dead Space is a remake of the 2008 survival horror action game of the same name. But I'm coming into this with fresh eyes and fresh opinions due to the fact that I never played the original, because I don't really play a lot of horror games. Regardless of that though, I've played the Dead Space remake, and while it isn't a perfect ride, it's a decidedly more positive than negative experience. Let's start with this. How scary is this game? Because we're taking games for what they are and what they're trying to do. I'm only ever critiquing a game's ideas and the execution of those ideas. And a big part of what this game is supposed to be is scary. And I would say that it's decently scary, but far from the pinnacle of fright that some true horror connoisseurs might want. And this is mostly due to your ability to sufficiently fight back in nearly all situations. In a lot of horror and survival horror games, you are often given extremely limited resources to fight back with, and frequently will have to resort to simply running away. And that lack of a viable defense or option to do away with the threat helps instill a sense of anxiety and fear. Here in Dead Space, an hour into the game, I had 95 bullets. So there was maybe one tier of tension completely evaporated, because from the beginning, I very rarely ever felt like I might not be able to fight back. But while that one facet of the horror wasn't present, there are still others. Obviously, the ambiance of the eerie alien-infested ship is doing a lot as a setting, but it's the fact that you're constantly hearing distant sounds like skittering and growling and hissing in the distance, and never quite knowing when one of the creatures that are all around you are gonna strike, you know? You pair this with some fantastically chilling ambient music and you get an aggravatingly tense environment, and I mean that in a good way. I'm honestly getting chills down my spine right now thinking about how badly I wanted the music to stop sometimes while I was exploring the dark ship, because the music does so much to make you feel like something is coming even if it isn't. It's really fucking well done. But as I said, because of your overwhelming ability to defend yourself, when you get on a roll of encounters, you start to feel like a real tough guy. And so when the music and atmosphere make you feel as though something is coming, instead of being scared, your reaction is, fuck it, let them come. I'll just kill him anyway. I guess what I'm saying is that the horror aspect of Dead Space isn't ineffective, but feels a bit inconsistent at best. I think you will be scared, but I can't vouch for when or for how long. Speaking of length, Dead Space is around 11 to 12 hours long. My game clocked in at around 11 hours and 20 minutes. The majority of the game is time well spent, but it does unfortunately feel a bit long in the tooth for what it is. And I wouldn't say it's a matter of a bunch of horrible ideas or anything like that. It's more of a pacing issue where certain sections are simply much longer than necessary. More so than a matter of total length, it then becomes more of an issue of how I was made to spend that time. Like for instance, the game's chapter 7 is extremely long and drags its feet quite a bit, with a lot of beats that aren't even very enjoyable. The following chapters 8 and 9 are both shorter chapters that probably add up to the length of chapter 7. But that making up for lost time is irrelevant, because at the end of the day, I still did the unenjoyable thing for far too long. One might even argue that the length is what made it unenjoyable. But what I'm getting at is there is some misplaced time allocation going on here in Dead Space. Not enough to ruin your experience, but enough that you might cut a game session short due to fatigue of the tedium. Despite that, however, Dead Space still has a decent decent amount of tricks and certain gameplay gimmicks that it usually juggles well, whether it's using the ship's cannons to target asteroids and monsters, sections where you have to cleverly outfox a pseudo-unkillable necromorph, or the unforgettable if not disorienting moments spent in zero gravity. All that with a decent roster of well-rationed enemy types. It's quite good. But now just how the abundance of ammunition sorta works against the game in certain aspects, so too does the assortment of weapons. There are 7 weapons and they are not all made equally. For instance, there is a gun called the Ripper, and it shoots buzzsaws. You can also suspend the spinning saws and make them float in front of you for a decent period of time. Doing this, you are able to effectively stun lock about 70% of the enemies in the game. And by prioritizing Ripper ammunition and upgrades, you can make a breeze of a ton of the encounters. And while most of the time in survival games, flamethrowers are often overpowered, I couldn't even find a reason to carry this thing here. The flamethrower in this game sucked ass for me. There's no other way to put it. Most of the game I was just using the starting mining gun and the Ripper, but I did find fantastic uses for the force gun and rifle as well, even though for about half of the game the rifle really feels useless if I'm being honest. Whatever. Like the rest of the game, the weapons are done well, but are more than a few steps away from greatness. But anyway, the last thing I want to talk about is the story. The story is okay. It's fine. It's not the most compelling world or lore. In fact, I would find that I kept having to force myself to care about what was going on at all. And some of the cooler world building it does set up, the game usually just doesn't deliver on. Not to mention a twist that it's being telegraphed hard as fuck for like more than half the game. I'm not even joking. But it doesn't matter, because if worst comes to worst, you can just ignore all of the narrative shit and enjoy the cool little scary space romp. When you pile up the entire experience, I feel like Dead Space is really good, but not great. And if I had to put a number on it, I'm thinking a 7.5 out of 10. It's not quite the masterful split of horror and action that they were going for, but I do see the vision. Anyway, that's my opinion. Feel free to let me know yours and tell me how stupid and wrong I am in the comments. Until next time, I am Waifu Belector. I am just a normal guy. I like hentai, and I'm gonna rest before the next big game comes out. Goodbye.